I still remember the day I met Ryan. It was my second year of college, during that literature class everyone took for easy credits. He sat next to me, all confident smiles and intelligent eyes. When he borrowed my notes and returned them with a coffee invitation scribbled in the margin, I couldn't say no. "You're different," he told me on our third date, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Most girls chase me. You make me work for your attention." I hadn't been playing hard to get. I was just cautious, but his persistence wore me down, and soon I was falling hard. We were inseparable after that. Late-night study sessions turned into whispered promises about our future. He had big dreams, his own business empire, a beautiful home, a family. When he proposed during our graduation ceremony, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was small but perfect. Those first 2 years of marriage felt like extended honeymoon. He'd bring me coffee in bed, leave little notes in my lunch bag. I thought we were unbreakable. Then Ryan's business started taking off. At first, I was proud, watching him build something from nothing. But slowly, those late-night strategy sessions replaced our dinner dates. His phone became an extension of his hand, always ringing, always more important than whatever I was saying. Just until we're stable. He'd promise, kissing my forehead before rushing out the door at dawn. "We're building our future, Aria." I believed him until the night I found lipstick smeared on his collar. Not my shade. Not even close. "It's from Stephanie," he explained too quickly. She hugged me after we closed the Henderson deal. "You're being paranoid." Maybe I would have believed him if I hadn't seen the messages from S on his phone later that week. "Miss you. Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" When confronted, he called me crazy, said I was imagining things. But his eyes couldn't meet mine, and I knew. After that, our home felt like a battlefield. Coldness where warmth once lived. Silence instead of laughter. We started sleeping in separate rooms. Him in the guest bedroom, me alone in what used to be ours. 3 months of this half-life, and we finally agreed on something. Divorce was our only option. "It's for the best," he said, sliding the papers across our kitchen table. "We want different things." I nodded, numb. We did want different things. I wanted loyalty. He wanted freedom. The morning I was supposed to sign those papers, I woke up feeling sick. I thought it was just stress until I remembered I was late. Very late. The pregnancy test was an afterthought, something to rule out before I took medication for what I assumed was a stress-induced stomach bug. 2 pink lines. Clear as day. I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, staring at that little stick that had just changed everything. A baby. Our baby. For a moment, I considered telling him. Maybe this would change things. Maybe we could try again. Then my phone buzzed with a message from him. "Don't forget to sign all the flagged pages. My lawyer needs everything by 5. Cold. Business-like. Already moved on." My hands trembled as I signed each page later that day, the pen feeling heavier with each signature. He didn't deserve to know. Not now. Maybe not ever. As I handed the papers back to him, across the table at his lawyer's office, our fingers brushed. For a second, I almost broke. "Is there anything else?" he asked, already standing to leave. I placed my hand over my still flat stomach. "No, I lied. Nothing at all." He nodded once and walked away. He never looked back to see the tears falling down my face. The pregnancy test was still in my purse when I boarded the train 3 days later. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was the only proof that the tiny life inside me was real. As the landscape blurred past the window, I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered my first promise as a mother. "It's just us now, little one. But we'll be okay." 3 cities away seemed far enough. I chose Arlington because nobody there knew me or Ryan. No mutual friends to report back, no chance encounters at the grocery store. Just a fresh start. Finding an apartment while hiding morning sickness wasn't easy. The realtor thought I was being picky, but I couldn't tell her I was calculating whether the bathroom was close enough to the bedroom for middle-of-the-night dashes when pregnancy, nausea, hit hardest. "You're single?" the landlord asked, eyeing my bare ring finger when I signed the lease. I hesitated. Yes. The word felt strange. 5 years with Ryan. And suddenly, I was alone. My first doctor's appointment was the hardest. The waiting room was full of couples, husbands with their hands protectively on their wives' bellies, flipping through parenting magazines together. I sat alone in the corner, scrolling through my phone to look busy. "Father's information," the nurse asked, clipboard in hand. "Not in the picture," I replied, the words catching in my throat. The first time I felt the baby kick, I was unpacking the last of my boxes. A small flutter, like butterfly wings against my ribs. I dropped the photo frame I was holding. Thankfully, it landed on the carpet and froze, waiting to feel it again. When it came, stronger this time, I burst into tears. Joy and grief tangled together because there was no one to share this miracle with. I called my mother that night. We hadn't spoken much since I married Ryan. He never liked her interference. But now I needed her. "I'm pregnant." I blurted out before she could even say hello. "The divorce is final, and Ryan doesn't know." The silence stretched between us before she spoke. "Oh, sweetheart, are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything except that I couldn't face Ryan's reaction, whether it would be anger, indifference, or worse, an obligatory offer to try again. Our marriage had been empty long before the divorce papers. I wouldn't trap either of us in that again, especially not with a child caught in the middle. My belly grew along with my determination. I found a job as an administrative assistant at a marketing firm. Nothing glamorous, but they had good health insurance and didn't ask too many questions about my situation. Nights were spent assembling baby furniture and reading parenting books, talking to my bump about the life we'd build together. When my water broke 3 weeks early, panic gripped me. The Uber driver kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror as I breathed through contractions. At the hospital, I clutched my overnight bag with one hand and the nurse's station counter with the other. "Is someone coming to be with you?" the intake nurse asked kindly. "No," I managed between breaths. "Just me. 14 hours of labor. 14 hours of wishing, just once, that I wasn't facing this alone." The nurse who held my hand through the final pushes became my temporary family, cheering me on when I didn't think I could push anymore. "One more," she urged. "You can do this." And then, suddenly, a cry pierced the room. A tiny, perfect sound that changed everything. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the squirming, red-faced miracle on my chest. Looking into my daughter's face for the first time, I saw Ryan's eyes staring back at me. But instead of pain, I felt a fierce, protective love wash over me. "Zara," I whispered, the name I'd chosen after my grandmother, the strongest woman I'd ever known. "It's just you and me, little one." The birth certificate form had a blank space for father. I stared at it for a long time before writing unknown, another lie to add to the growing pile. But as I watched my daughter sleeping in the hospital bassinet, I convinced myself it was for the best. For all of us. The first year passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, and tiny milestones, each one bittersweet, precious moments that Ryan would never see. Sometimes when Zara mastered something new, my finger would hover over his name in my phone. But I never pressed call. By Zara's second birthday, we had settled into our routine. The marketing firm had promoted me twice. Our tiny apartment was filled with stuffed animals and picture books. My mother visited occasionally, falling in love with her granddaughter despite her lingering disapproval of my decision. "She looks just like him," she commented once, watching Zara stack blocks with intense concentration, another trait from her father. "She's her own person," I replied firmly, and she was. Strong-willed, curious, and completely unaware that half of her story was missing. For 5 years, that was enough. Until the day everything changed. 5 years can change a lot. My assistant manager position had grown into marketing director. Zara had transformed from a babbling toddler into a headstrong kindergartner who loved dinosaurs and could already read simple books. Our little apartment had been traded for a modest house with a backyard swing set. We were happy. That Tuesday started like any other. I dropped Zara at school, her Triceratops backpack nearly as big as she was, and headed to the office for our quarterly planning meeting. Big news, my boss announced as soon as I walked in. "We're being acquired by Vertex Corporation. Their marketing team will be here next week to start the transition." I nodded, making notes, until she added, "Their CEO is flying in personally to oversee everything. Apparently, he likes to be hands-on with new acquisitions." Something about the way she said it made me look up. "Who's their CEO?" "Ryan Malik. He's built quite a reputation in the industry. Brilliant businessman, though I hear he's a bit intense." The pen fell from my hand. "Ryan. My Ryan. No, not mine anymore, but Zara's father. The man who had no idea he had a daughter. "Are you okay? You've gone pale," my boss asked, concerned. "Fine. I lied. Just surprised. The market's been talking about this acquisition for months." I spent the next week in a state of panic, rehearsing what I'd say when we inevitably came face to face. Would he recognize me immediately? Did I look different enough after 5 years? Should I request transfer to another department? The day of the meeting arrived too quickly. I wore my most professional outfit, a navy pantsuit that showed none of the woman he had once loved. My hair, longer now, was pulled back in a severe bun. I even switched my usual perfume, as if that could somehow mask who I was. I was already seated in the conference room when he walked in. 5 years had been kind to him. His face was more angular, more mature. Success had given him an air of authority that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those were exactly the same. He scanned the room as he spoke, greeting the team collectively. When his gaze reached me, he faltered mid-sentence. Just for a second, barely noticeable to anyone but me. Then he recovered, continuing his presentation about the company's future direction. I kept my eyes on my notebook, taking meaningless notes to avoid looking at him. When the meeting ended, I gathered my things quickly, hoping to escape before. "Aria." His voice still had the same effect on me, like a fist closing around my heart. I turned slowly, professional smile fixed firmly in place. "Mr. Malik, nice presentation." He flinched at the formality. "Can we talk privately?" The walk to my office felt endless. I was acutely aware of him behind me, of the whispers from curious colleagues. Once inside, I closed the door and turned to face him, desk between us like a shield. "You disappeared," he said simply. I raised an eyebrow. "We divorced. People generally don't stay in touch after that." "Changed your number. Moved without a forwarding address. That's more than just not staying in touch," he countered. I needed a fresh start. His eyes traveled over my face, searching for something. "You look well." "Thank you. So, do you—" The awkward silence stretched between us, 5 years of unspoken words filling the space. Then his gaze drifted to my desk, landing on the framed photo of Zara at the beach last summer, laughing as waves chased her. He picked it up before I could stop him. I watched his face change as he studied it, confusion Then dawning realization, followed by something that looked dangerously like pain. She has my mother's eyes, he said quietly. My heart hammered against my ribs. She's my daughter. He looked up at me, and I knew he had done the math already. How old is she? 5. I couldn't speak, couldn't lie again face to face. My silence was answer enough. Were you ever going to tell me? His voice was so controlled, it scared me more than if he'd shouted. I thought it was best for everyone. I managed. He set the photo down carefully, too carefully. Best for everyone, or just best for you. You didn't want me anymore. Why would you want? That's not a decision you had the right to make. He cut me off. She's my daughter, too. The words I'd dreaded for 5 years, finally spoken aloud. What's her name? He asked, tone softer now. Zara. A small smile touched his lips. After your grandmother. She always liked me. The casual reminder of our shared past made my throat tight. Ryan, I want to meet her, he said, not a request, but a statement. I've already missed 5 years. I won't miss any more. Fear gripped me. It's not that simple. She doesn't know about you. Then it's time she did. He moved toward the door, then paused, hand on the knob. I'll be in town for the next month. Figure out how you want to do this, but it's happening, Aria. After he left, I sat at my desk, staring at Zara's photo. The perfect little world I'd built for us was about to change forever, and I had no idea how to prepare either of us for what came next. The legal notice arrived on a Thursday, tucked between a pizza flyer and my electric bill. Petition for paternity and custody evaluation. The header read in bold, intimidating font. I sank onto the couch, papers trembling in my hands as I read through Ryan's demands. DNA testing, immediate partial custody, decision-making authority in Zara's education and health care. Mommy, can I have apple juice? Zara padded into the living room, her favorite dinosaur toy dragging behind her. I quickly shoved the papers under a cushion and forced a smile. Of course, sweetie. Coming right up. As I poured her juice, I wondered how I'd explain to my 5-year-old that the father she'd never known suddenly wanted to claim her, that the bedtime stories about Daddy living far away were lies, that our perfect little team of 2 might become 3 against my will. The next morning, I dropped Zara at school as usual. As I kissed her goodbye, a familiar black car pulled into the parking lot. That's the nice man, Zara exclaimed, pointing excitedly. My blood ran cold. What nice man, baby? The one who always says hi to me at recess. He gives me chocolate sometimes. Fury rose in my chest as I spotted Ryan stepping out of his car, coffee in hand, and a small gift bag dangling from his fingers. He'd been visiting her at school. Behind my back. Go inside, sweetie, I instructed Zara, keeping my voice level. I need to talk to that man for a minute. Once she was safely through the doors, I marched across the parking lot, rage fueling each step. What the hell do you think you're doing? I hissed when I reached him. Ryan remained infuriatingly calm. Getting to know my daughter. By stalking her at school, by giving her food without my permission, she could have allergies you don't know about. Allergies I should know about, he corrected, and I checked with her teacher first. I'm not irresponsible. Aria, you can't just show up here. There are proper channels. Like the legal notice you received, he interrupted. I assumed you'd try to fight that, so I'm taking whatever moments I can get. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You can't buy her affection with chocolates and toys. His expression softened slightly. I'm not trying to buy anything. I just want her to know me a little before you're forced to tell her who I am. The word forced hung between us like a threat. That evening, I called my lawyer. Her assessment wasn't encouraging. He has rights, Aria, she explained gently. And frankly, the fact you kept his child from him for 5 years won't look good to a judge. He wasn't fit to be a father. I argued. Based on what evidence? An extramarital affair. That doesn't make someone an unfit parent. I hung up feeling cornered. When I went to check on Zara before bed, I found her drawing at her little desk. "What are you making, sweetie?" I asked, brushing her dark hair away from her forehead. She held up her creation proudly. "My family." The picture showed two stick figures, one small with long hair, one taller with shorter hair. But there was a space beside them, an obvious gap where another figure should be. "Why is there a space?" I asked, my heart aching. Zara shrugged. "For when my daddy comes home. Jesse at school says everyone has a daddy, even if they don't live together. Is my daddy coming home soon?" I sat on her bed, patting the space beside me. When she climbed up, I held her close, breathing in her sweet shampoo smell. "Your daddy?" I began, unsure how to continue. "He lives far away, but he's thinking about coming to see you." Her eyes lit up. "Really? When?" "I'm not sure yet, but we'll talk more about it soon." After she fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen staring at my phone. Finally, I texted Ryan, "We need to talk." About Zara, not through lawyers. His response came immediately. My hotel. Restaurant bar. 9 p.m. The hotel bar was quiet for a weeknight. Ryan was already there, nursing what looked like whiskey when I arrived. He stood when he saw me, an old habit from our dating days that caught me off guard. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out my chair. I sat stiffly. "I'm not here to make nice. I'm here because Zara asked about you tonight." Something like hope flickered across his face. "What did she say?" "She drew a family picture with space for you. She wants to know when her daddy is coming home." He took a long sip of his drink. "And what did you tell her?" "That you're thinking about visiting her. But Ryan, we need to do this right. She's 5. She's sensitive. You can't just barge into her life with gifts and then disappear again when you get bored." Anger flashed in his eyes. "Is that what you think of me? That I'd abandon my own child?" "You already abandoned me." I shot back before I could stop myself. "I didn't abandon you. You left me, remember? Signed the papers and vanished. After you cheated." "I never cheated on you," he exclaimed, loud enough that nearby patrons glanced our way. I laughed bitterly. The lipstick, the messages from S. "Don't rewrite history. Ryan." He leaned forward, voice intense. "It wasn't what you thought. But that's not why we're here. This is about Zara." "Yes, it is." I agreed, refocusing. "Call off your lawyers. Let's figure this out between us, for her sake." Ryan studied me for a long moment. "Fine, but I want scheduled visitation, starting immediately, and I want to be formally acknowledged as her father. No more nice man at the playground nonsense. I need time to prepare her." "You've had 5 years," he cut in. "I've had 5 days. You stole 5 years I can never get back. Aria." I missed her first words, her first steps. I didn't get to hold her when she was born. The pain in his voice was raw, genuine. For the first time, I allowed myself to see this from his perspective. The shock of discovering you have a child, the grief of missing their early years, the anger at being denied that connection. 1 week, I finally said, "Give me 1 week to prepare her. Then you can come to our house for dinner, and we'll tell her together." He nodded slowly. 1 week, not a day more. As we stood to leave, he reached for my arm, his touch still achingly familiar after all this time. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I never stopped looking for you after you left. 2 years of private investigators and dead ends. I thought maybe you'd." "Thought I'd what?" His eyes met mine, vulnerability I hadn't seen since our early days together. "Thought maybe you died." It was the only explanation that made sense for why you'd disappear so completely. I pulled my arm away gently. Part of me did die. Ryan, the part that believed in us. Walking away from him that night was harder than it should have been. Something dangerous still lingered between us, not just the shared connection of our daughter, but the embers of what once was, embers that might still burn me if I got too close. The week passed too quickly. Each night after putting Zara to bed, I rehearsed different ways to tell her about Ryan, each version sounding more inadequate than the last. How do you explain to a 5-year-old why you kept her father a secret? Why the story of Daddy living far away was a lie? The evening before our scheduled dinner with Ryan, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, there stood Sandra, Ryan's sister, holding a large gift bag. "I hope it's okay that I came," she said hesitantly. "Ryan told me everything." I hadn't seen Sandra since the divorce. Standing in my doorway, she looked like a female version of her brother. Same dark eyes, same cautious smile. "Come in," I managed, stepping aside. Once seated in my living room, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Before anything else, I think you need to see these." She handed me the phone. On the screen was a text conversation between her and Ryan, dated from 5 years ago, just after our divorce. "Have you heard from Arya? I've been to her parents, her work, everywhere. It's like she vanished." Sandra's response: "Maybe she doesn't want to be found. You need to respect that." I scrolled through more messages, dozens of them, all from Ryan, spanning over 2 years, all asking if she'd heard anything about me. My throat tightened. He hired 3 different private investigators. Sandra said quietly, put up missing person alerts, called every hospital in a 100-mile radius thinking you might have been in an accident. "Why?" I whispered. "Because he never stopped loving you, Arya, even when you believed the worst of him." I handed the phone back, confused. But I saw the evidence. The lipstick, the messages. Sandra sighed deeply. The lipstick was mine. I hugged him after his business dinner. As for the messages, S was me, Sandra. I had just come back from studying abroad. Those messages were about the surprise party we were planning for your anniversary. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "What?" "Last night was amazing," referred to the venue we'd found. "When can I see you again?" was about finalizing decorations. She looked down at her hands. "When you confronted him, he was shocked, hurt that you'd think he could cheat. But his pride kept him from explaining. And mine kept me from listening." I murmured. "All these years, I built my new life on a foundation of what I thought was betrayal. But what if it had all been a misunderstanding? A terrible, life-altering misunderstanding? Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, "Because tomorrow my brother meets his daughter for the first time, and I thought you should know who he really is before that happens." She stood to leave, placing the gift bag on my coffee table. "This is for Zara, from her aunt." After she left, I sat alone in the dark, piecing together a new version of my past. Our past. The tears came without warning, 5 years of certainty crumbling around me. The next day, I was still processing Sandra's revelations when Ryan arrived for dinner, looking nervous in a casual button-down shirt, clutching a small stuffed triceratops, Zara's favorite dinosaur. How did he know? I asked her teacher. He explained, noticing my questioning look. Said I was her uncle getting a birthday gift. Another lie in the tangled web we'd created. Zara was shy at first, hiding partially behind my legs when I introduced them. "Zara, this is a very special friend of Mommy's," I began, kneeling to her level. "His name is Ryan." "The nice man from school," she said, recognition dawning. Ryan crouched down too, keeping a respectful distance. "I brought you something," he said, offering the dinosaur. I heard Triceratops are your favorite. She accepted it cautiously, then smiled. Thank you. His name is going to be Spike. Dinner went better than I'd expected. Ryan was patient, asking Zara questions about her interests, laughing at her dinosaur facts, never pushing too hard. I watched them interact, seeing pieces of him in her, the way they both gestured when excited, how they tilted their heads when curious. How had I not noticed these similarities before? After Zara went to bed, Ryan and I sat at the kitchen table, the weight of what came next hanging between us. When are we going to tell her? He asked, turning his coffee mug in circles. Soon, I promised, but I need to know something first. Why didn't you explain about the lipstick? About the messages? Why let me believe you cheated? He looked up, surprised. Sandra told you. Yesterday. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was hurt that you could think I'd cheat. When you jumped to that conclusion, it felt like you didn't know me at all. My pride was wounded, and mine kept me from asking more questions. I admitted. We sat in silence, contemplating the years wasted over wounded pride and miscommunication. There's something else you should know, I said finally. After the divorce, when I found out I was pregnant, I almost told you. I picked up the phone a dozen times. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid. The truth, finally spoken aloud. Afraid you'd either want nothing to do with us, which would break my heart all over again, or that you'd feel obligated to try again for the baby's sake. I couldn't bear either option. Ryan reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. I would have wanted to know. I would have wanted to be there. Not out of obligation, but because it was my child. Our child. The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache. We can't change the past, I said softly. But we can do better now, for Zara's sake. He nodded. For Zara. Over the next few weeks, Ryan became a constant presence in our lives. Weekend trips to the zoo, Wednesday night dinners, each visit lengthening as Zara grew more comfortable with him. The moment we finally told her who he really was remains etched in my memory. We sat her down together, her little face solemn as she sensed the importance of our words. Remember how you asked about your daddy? I began gently. She nodded, eyes wide. Well, Ryan is your daddy, I said, my voice catching. Her gaze shifted between us. Processing. Really? Ryan leaned forward. Really? And I've been looking for you for a very long time. Where were you before? She asked, the innocent question cutting straight to the heart of our mistakes. Ryan looked at me, then back to Zara. I was lost, he said simply, but I found you now, and I'm not going anywhere. She considered this, then climbed into his lap, touching his face with curious fingers. Your eyes look like mine. That's because you're my daughter, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Watching them together, this man I once loved and the daughter who was part of us both, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Exactly. Not yet, but the possibility of it, like the first green shoot after a long winter. That night, after Zara was asleep, Ryan lingered at the door. Thank you, he said quietly, for today, for her. She's happy, I replied. That's what matters. He studied my face, as if memorizing it. And you? Are you happy, Arya? The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I had built a good life, a safe life. But happy? I'm getting there, I answered honestly. As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, the lipstick wasn't the only reason I left. You know, we were already broken. Work had become your whole world. He paused, hand on the doorframe. I know. I threw myself into building something impressive to make you proud. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that you were the reason I was building it in the first place. The admission, so simple and yet so profound, stayed with me long after he'd gone. We had both made mistakes. Both let pride and misunderstanding destroy what we had built. But watching him with Zara, patient, attentive, fully present in a way he hadn't been with me at the end, I wondered if people really could change. And more dangerously, I wondered if hearts could heal. Co-parenting with Ryan wasn't as difficult as I had feared. We settled into a routine. He would take Zara 2 evenings a week and every other weekend. She flourished under the attention, coming home from his place with stories about the fort they built or the stars they watched from his balcony. "Daddy says I'm smart like you," she told me one night as I tucked her in. "But stubborn like him." I laughed. He's right about that. As Zara's 6th birthday approached, we faced our first co-parenting challenge, planning her celebration together. We could do it at that indoor playground she loves, I suggested during our weekly planning coffee. What about the Science Museum? Ryan countered. They have a new dinosaur exhibit. I raised an eyebrow. That's actually perfect. He grinned, that familiar smile that still made my heart skip. See, we can agree on something. The day of the party, I arrived early to set up. Ryan was already there, hanging dinosaur decorations with meticulous care. "You didn't have to do all this," I said, taking in the elaborate display. "I wanted to. I've missed 5 birthdays already." The party was a success. Zara ran from exhibit to exhibit, her friends trailing behind her, while Ryan and I trailed behind them all. When it came time for cake, we stood together behind her as she made her wish, the 3 of us captured in a photo that would later sit framed on both our mantels. As the last guest left, Zara crashed from her sugar high, falling asleep against Ryan's shoulder. He carried her to my car, placing her gently in her booster seat. "Thank you for today," he said as he closed the car door. "For letting me be part of it." In the lamplight of the parking lot, with our sleeping daughter safely buckled in, the walls I built around my heart felt suddenly thin. "Would you want to grab a coffee sometime?" I asked impulsively. "Just us. To talk." His surprise was evident. "I'd like that." That coffee turned into dinner the following week. Without Zara as a buffer, conversations wandered into deeper territory. "When did you know you wanted to be a father?" I asked over dessert. "The moment you told me you were pregnant," he replied without hesitation. "In the alternate universe where you actually told me." The hint of pain in his voice made me wince. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I made a decision based on hurt and pride." "We both did." He reached across the table, his fingers barely touching mine. "But we're here now." As months passed, our individual time with Zara began to include more moments as a trio. Sunday brunches, holiday planning, school events where we sat together rather than awkwardly apart. One night after helping Zara with her homework, Ryan lingered in my kitchen, watching me wash dishes. "Something's been bothering me," he said. I tensed, waiting for another uncomfortable revelation. "What's that?" In all our conversations about what went wrong, we never talk about what was right. He took the dish from my hands, setting it aside. "We were good together once, weren't we? It wasn't all bad." The question made my throat tight. No, it wasn't all bad. Not even close. "I still think about our first apartment," he said softly. "How you'd sing in the shower every morning. How we'd stay up all night talking about nothing. I think about Christmas at your parents' house," I admitted. "How your mom taught me to make her special bread. How you fell asleep under the tree." The memories we'd both suppressed for so long came flooding back, good times that had been overshadowed by how things ended. "We were young," I said. "Making mistakes wasn't the problem. Not knowing how to fix them was." He nodded slowly. "And now? Now we're older. Maybe wiser." "Definitely wiser," he agreed, the corner of his mouth lifting in that half smile I'd always loved. A few days later, Ryan appeared at my door unexpectedly, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Can we talk?" he asked, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I invited him in, concerned. "Is everything okay? Is Zara?" "She's fine. This is about us." He paced my living room, hands jammed in his pockets. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about making mistakes and fixing them." My heart began to race. "Okay." He stopped pacing and faced me. "I've never stopped loving you, Arya. Even when I thought you'd chosen to disappear from my life forever, I loved you. When I found out about Zara, it was like being given a second chance I never thought I'd have." "Ryan, let me finish," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to forget the past or pretend we didn't hurt each other. I'm asking if you might consider a future, a real one where we both do better this time." He pulled something from his pocket, not a ring box as I momentarily feared, but a set of keys. "These are to a house," he explained. "Not too far from here. 3 bedrooms, a backyard for Zara to play, space for all of us. I'm not asking you to move in right away or even say yes to trying again. I'm just saying the option is there. If you want it, if we want it." I stared at the keys, my emotions a hurricane. "A house? You bought a house without telling me." "I put a deposit down," he clarified. "It's refundable. But I wanted you to see it before I made any final decisions. It would be yours and Zara's first, mine second. Or it could be all of ours. Whatever you decide." The old me would have bristled at his presumption, seen it as another example of Ryan making decisions without me. But the woman I'd become recognized it for what it was, an offering, a bridge extended across the chasm we'd created. "I'd like to see it," I said finally. The house was beautiful, bright and open, with room to grow. As Ryan showed me through each space, I could see the vision he had. Zara's toys in the playroom, family dinners in the sunlit kitchen, quiet evenings on the porch swing. In the master bedroom, I stopped, reality hitting me. "This is a big step." "It's huge," he agreed. "Maybe too huge too fast." "I'm not saying no," I clarified. "Just, we need to be sure this time. For Zara's sake, as much as our own." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then how about this? We take a year. Keep co-parenting as we have been, but also date each other again. Really date. Learn who we are now, not who we were then. And after a year, if we both want this, we make it official. If not, no hard feelings. We'll still be Zara's parents, still be in each other's lives." It was sensible, mature, everything our young selves hadn't been able to manage. That night, after tucking Zara in, I found her staring at the old family photo from her birthday. "Mommy," she asked sleepily, "does Daddy still love you?" Children and their impossible questions. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because he looks at you the way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my book, and he told me he has a big surprise for us." I smiled, touching her cheek. "Grown-up love is complicated." "But do you love him?" she persisted, fighting sleep. Did I? The man who had broken my heart but was now piecing it back together? The father who had missed years but was making every moment count now? The person who had once been my whole world and might be again? "I'm learning to," I answered honestly. "Just like he's learning to love the new me." She nodded, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. 3 months later, I moved the first of my boxes into the house Ryan had found. Not into the master bedroom. That would come later, if at all, but into the guest suite downstairs. A compromise. A beginning. Zara raced through the empty rooms, claiming spaces, her excitement filling the house with life before we'd even properly moved in. That evening, when she was finally asleep in her new room, Ryan and I sat on the front porch steps, a comfortable silence between us. "Are you happy?" he asked, echoing the question he'd asked months before. This time, my answer came without hesitation. Yes, I am. He reached for my hand, and I let him take it, our fingers intertwining like they used to, like perhaps they were always meant to. Above us, stars dotted the night sky, the same stars that had witnessed our beginning, our ending, and now, maybe, our beginning again. Different people now. Wiser, stronger, more careful with each other's hearts. I signed divorce papers the day I learned I was pregnant. I said softly, "And 5 years later, you found our daughter." "And you," he added, "I found you too. Not an ending, but a middle. Our story still being written one careful page at a time."